Well, greetings, philosophy students. This is an introductory lecture to chapters 7 and 8 of Mesle's text, Process-Relational Philosophy, an introduction to Alfred North Whitehead. So I'm going to say some words I do not like to say in the first part of this lecture. I just wanted to warn you, and just so you know that. So when I say the word power, what comes to mind? Maybe political leaders, billionaires, armies, or natural disasters. Maybe the power to win an argument, to command attention, to make decisions others must follow. That's what most of us have been taught, right? Power is the ability to make things happen on our terms, to change others without being changed ourselves. Robert Mesle, following the process-relational philosophy of Alfred North Whitehead and Bernard Loomer, who is another process scholar, theologian, philosopher, calls this unilateral power. So unilateral power. That's the kind of power most of us grow up seeing in politics, religion, business, education, even in families. It's top down. It flows one way. And it's often assumed to be the measure of what's most real, most valuable, even most divine. But what if that entire vision is wrong? Let me say that again. What if we've built our whole culture, our understanding of God, whatever that means for you, of leadership, of morality, of relationship, on a misunderstanding of what real power is? Mesle's two chapters, Unilateral Power and Relational Power, are here to kind of wake us up. These are very much the pivot chapters in this text. Everything in the process-relational worldview turns on this insight. True power is not the power to dominate, it's the power to be affected and to respond creatively. So let's start with chapter 7, Unilateral Power. Mesle begins by unpacking the traditional view that runs deep in Western philosophy, which we have studied. He takes us from Plato to Aristotle to Descartes to Locke, and he shows us how this long tradition links power, value, and reality. To be powerful, we're told, is to be unaffected, to control others, to remain the same, to resist change. God, in this model, is perfect precisely because God never changes. God is pure act, never acted upon. This view paints love, vulnerability, and openness as weaknesses. But here's the catch. When you look closely at how this vision works in real life, it leads to abuse. It justifies patriarchy, racism, authoritarianism, child abuse. Wherever someone's humanity is diminished, it's because we think the powerful must remain untouched by the weak. Unilateral power always moves in one direction, downward. And the costs are usually enormous, not only for the oppressed, but even for those with power. They become isolated, disconnected, unable to be in genuine relationship. They lose the ability to be changed, to grow, to love. Mesle says, look at the purest examples of unilateral power. Torture, rape, slavery, child abuse. Is that what we want to call the essence of value and reality? Now pause. Chapter 8 is a total reorientation. Mesle asks us to imagine something radically different, relational power. This is the power not just to affect, but also to be affected and to respond creatively. Relational power is dynamic, so it changes. It moves both ways. It's the power of conversation, of mutual care, of listening and responding. It's the power of growth. Bernard Loomer, who I mentioned earlier, famously described relational power as, quote, the capacity to be affected by others and to affect them in return, end quote. And Mesle expands that into three parts. First, the ability to be open and affected by the world around us. Second, the ability to create ourselves in response to what we've taken in. And third, the ability to influence others out of that authentic self we've become. Think about this in terms of parenting. And I have a 13-year-old, so I think about this in terms of parenting a lot. Mesle uses that example powerfully. Unilateral parenting says, quote, because I said so, end quote. It's about control, obedience, and maintaining distance. Relational parenting listens. It sees the child as a real person. It shapes boundaries out of love and understanding. It influences by being influenced. And that, Mesle argues, is far more powerful and far more demanding. Relational power isn't weakness. It takes strength, a lot of strength. Strength to listen, strength to be vulnerable, strength to resist retaliation, and instead seek mutual transformation. transformation. And it's not just human. Mesle, drawing from process thinkers, extends relational power to the natural world. This is important. We are embedded in a living, breathing web of relationships that includes not just people, but animals, ecosystems, even molecules. So the more relationally responsive an organism is, the more alive it is. Electrons barely respond, but dogs do. Humans ideally respond deeply and creatively. The power to be affected is not a weakness. It's what makes life rich, sensitive, and meaningful. This vision of power changes everything. It changes how we think about ethics, which is important, not as obeying commands, but as participating in a web of mutual responsibility. It changes how we think about the divine or God, whatever that means for you, not as an unchanging ruler who imposes divine will, but as the most relational reality in existence. A God who is love, who feels, who responds, who is with us in our suffering and joy. It changes also how we think about justice. Coercion may work quickly, but persuasion and care and transformation, those are deeper and more lasting forms of power. And maybe, most importantly, it changes how we think about ourselves. You are powerful not when you dominate others, but when you can stay open to the beauty, the sorrow, the wisdom, and even the pain of others, and shape your life in response. That's real power, according to Mesle, according to Process-Relational. So as you read these chapters 7 and 8, I want to challenge you to do two things. First, reflect on your own experience. Think about times when you've used power. Was it unilateral or relational? What were the outcomes? How did it feel? What kind of world did it create? Second, consider your vision of the divine, of leadership, of community. What kind of power do you think is most real, most worthy of praise, most life-giving? You don't have to agree with everything Mesle says. I don't agree with everything Mesle says. But I promise you this, if you let yourself take this seriously, this difference between unilateral power and relational power, it will change how you see the world. As Mesle often says, he hopes you'll say both. Holy cow, and of course. Thank you, and enjoy the chapters. You folks are doing fantastic. It's been a great philosophy course experience for me, and I look forward to your posts. See you online.